thanks very much, everyone, and thank you for the kind introduction. And thanks very much for the invitation to speak at this year's AGM. I think there's a lot of people in the room that have something to be very proud of on the 20th anniversary of this incredible community organization. I think the sort of formal introduction is not much my style, so I think over the course of the next few minutes, and I promise Nancy it will only be a few minutes, you get a chance to know me a little bit better in my new role, and not my resume or what the snippet on a website might say. There's a few things that I care about that help guide my decision-making process in this new role, and a handful of them apply squarely to the work that Chad Transit is doing. Economic community development, social justice, and promoting a clean environment are three of my top priority areas. Dan, you mentioned Chad Transit in your remarks as fiscally, socially, and environmentally responsible. It's these sort of three themes that I think are a natural partnership between myself, Chad, and the federal government. These items aren't something that I kind of dreamed up out of the blue because I thought they sounded nice. They've developed over the course of my life, and more specifically during the course of the election campaign that we just went through at the end of last year. You can live in a community for 30 years and you'll never get to know it as well as you will when you knock on everybody's door and ask them what bothers them. Because people have very long answers if you're willing to spend some time and listen. But it was quite frankly, it was shocking to me the conditions that some people in our own community were living in. I didn't realize that about 1/5 of the members of our community are living with a disability. I know we had a significant proportion of our population were seniors, but I didn't necessarily understand the living conditions that they may experience and their lack of access to a lot of the sorts of transportation. So these things are all very important to me. I did mention promoting a healthy environment, which I got to say didn't necessarily grow just out of the campaign. I know I've joked over the course of the past year now since I decided to run for office. People are always asking me, when did you first get involved in politics? And I've actually got a great story. The very first official role I ever held was Vice President of the Environment Club when I was 7 years old in Frank H. McDonald Elementary School. I know it is a bit of a joke, but at the same time, it's something that I've cared about every day and every year since. I think during the formal introduction, you learned that I indeed still hold a research fellowship with the Center for International Sustainable Development Law, which is really a focus on how we can grow economic opportunities while protecting the environment at the same time. So this is something I do care deeply about. I don't want to spend too much time getting into the nitty-gritty about federal government policy. Suffice it to say that the federal government's campaign platform and indeed the first budget that they released marries perfectly with my own ideas of what government should be focusing on. If we look on economic development, we're implementing policies like the middle class tax cut, which people give me flack for because it sounds very vague. All income between $45,000 and $90,000 will be taxed less, and people who are earning over, I think the figure's about $211,000, are going to be taxed more on the income above that sort of threshold. And the universal child care benefit has been changed, so the wealthiest Canadians now don't access the benefit when it's not going to make a difference to the lives of their children, but more money is going to be put into the pockets of everyday families who could use the money to make a difference in their children's lives. On this kind of economic theory, and I know I'm getting into the weeds here a bit, one of the things that I believe very strongly is that we should be helping people out who need help a little more, and saying to the wealthiest Canadians, we're going to continue to create opportunities to help you grow your businesses, but when it comes to the taxation policy, you're being treated quite fairly when you compared to the people whose doors I've knocked on here in Victor County. By allocating a little more to the people who need it most, it's not just the right thing to do, but it makes an enormous difference for the economics of our community. If you look at the people who are earning, not earning $1 million a year, they tend to spend the money that they take in. They tend to spend it in the community that they live in. I was here for an event recently about, I think it was titled 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, and the speaker there was a very engaging guy who made the point that when $1 is spent in a community, it's spent 7 times over before it leaves. And I think the government's priorities match nicely with mine on how to promote economic development the social side, we've realized that there's a number of different things we can be investing in with the federal government. It's going to make a difference in people's lives, but also, again, make a difference to our communities at large. A prime example is everybody's heard the word infrastructure during the federal campaign a million times. It's hard to sometimes imagine what that means. It's not just water pipes, although it can be that too, for municipal councillors. That's very important. But it's also things like affordable housing. When you look at people who've actually studied the economics of investments in projects like affordable housing, you see that the cost of providing somebody with access to an affordable place to live is significantly less than the cost of dealing with the social problems that will arise if you don't deal with it. Among Canada's homeless population, there is a dramatic increase in the incidents that they have with the justice system, whether it's the police or the courts, with the healthcare system, because homelessness and mental health are so closely linked to one another. And if we actually take the first step and say, you know what, if we build affordable housing units, it's not only going to put people back to work during the construction phase, it's also going to save the government a significant amount of money on the back end, because we'll be spending less to take care of the social problems that are impeding these individuals' developmental progress. And finally, on the environmental piece, the government's priorities are very important to me. They started out at the very international level. One of the first things that was achieved was a new agreement with the Paris Climate Conference. But they're also investing in green infrastructure that's going to help us not just fight climate change, but make a difference in our community. This was a very long prelude to say public transit is something that checks all of these boxes. And in fact, the government, as part of its investment in infrastructure, has allocated $20 billion extra dollars to public transit in Canada. Most of that is going to major city centres, and frankly, most of it should. But I think it's important that we recognize that rural communities have transit needs as well. When I was meeting with different people during the course of the campaign, and since now representing them as my constituents, it's easy to see how public transit, if you take 5 minutes to chat with a person, how public transit can improve their ability to contribute to the economy. I've had folks come into our office saying, I can't find work. I don't know what to do. I realize you're not going to be able to give me a job because you're not a business. But I've tried everything. I try to figure out what the stumbling blocks are. There's a lot of people who are either with our senior population or living with a disability or are transportationally disadvantaged, which realistically a significant portion of our ethnic minorities, people living in poverty, Indigenous Canadians and New Canadians make up the bulk of the transportationally disadvantaged group that Danny referred to. But when I talk to people who are looking for a job, some have complained, you know what, I live in Westville. I don't have a car. I don't have anybody who can drive, so I've limited my job search to the town of Westville. It's unbelievable that that's a problem that we're facing in the 21st century in a country like Canada. Someone in Westville should not have any question that they can hop on a bus and work in Pickville during the tourist season. Somebody in Stellarton who gets a job doing forestry work out Pine Apple Woods in the county should be able to have reliable transit that gets them to work, to and from work every day. Realistically, Chad is probably not there yet, but it's moving very much in the right direction. It's providing a service that would seriously discriminate against people and their ability to find work in our community. Environmentally, the benefit is perhaps quite obvious. If you have more people riding the bus, those are cars off the road. So I won't spend too much time on that more obvious one. But the greatest benefit that I see to Chad Transit is on the social side. We did a series of consultations in advance of the federal budget to find out what people think the government should be doing in light of the promises we made during the election campaign. When I met with the nonprofit sector in Antigonish, in Pictou County, and along the Eastern Shore, without question, the top issue that nonprofits raised was a lack of access to rural transportation in Nova Scotia. They're serving people who often have transportation needs that aren't being met. If you're dealing with like the Pictou County Women's Center. They've got a slightly different name. There's a few different women's centers actually in Canadian-ish Pictou County and along the Eastern Shore. They're often dealing with women who are fleeing domestic violence. Oftentimes those are partners in a relationship that are dependent for transit on a spouse that they can no longer trust with their physical safety. Sometimes you're dealing with groups that are seeking to eradicate poverty, or groups like Career Connections that are trying to find work for people. Sometimes those groups are dealing with individuals, like I discussed before, who can't find transit to get to work, but they also can't find transit to get to the people who will help them find it. On this social side of the equation, there's not enough attention given to the fact that people can't get to where they're going to. So I would suggest that transit, like affordable housing, is one of those other items that we can point to and say the cost of providing public transit to a community is likely much less than the cost of not having people contribute to the economy. I know, Dan, you mentioned the Department of Community Services. It's actually pointed out we are saving money because groups like Chad Transit exist. What a great reason to be investing in groups like Chad Transit. So Danny and I are actually working together. We've met a couple times now to discuss opportunities to grow Chad Transit. And this summer, I don't know if we nailed a specific date down, it's July 7th. We're going to be hosting behind my office in New Glasgow a community consultation on public transit for Pictou County. Anyone who wants to attend, I would suggest is welcome. Sorry if I'm making this a bigger event than you wanted. But we've got a decent space, and we'd like to hear how people are impacted and what we can do to improve transit for the community. This is something I believe in. It's something that I want to champion as a cause in Ottawa, because I think it's ultimately going to make a bigger difference for our community, not just in Pictou County, but across the entire riding, the province, and indeed the entire country. So thanks very much for your time. Hopefully I kept it short enough to keep you from falling asleep. But I really appreciate the chance to come in, and I think together we can help Chad Transit make a difference for our community. Thank you very much.